to that specific scan event or timestamp. So Digital Street Review compiles a lot of data for the teams to utilize, and two of the most important reports I think that these teams will look at is the daily summary and the daily details. So the daily summary provides a total overview of what the carrier did on any given day, and this is exactly what they actually did. It shows their total street time and their net street time. So in other words, like if I went out in the early morning, but maybe I did a pivot, it'll show that I did a pivot over on this route, so it shows all of my total activity throughout the day. It'll show the different various allied times, if you had replenishment time or you had, customer contact, those types of things. It'll show all of your major street events. It'll show the percentage of the ZIP+4s that you visited on the route that day, so you can see whether you visited 80% of the route or 90% of the route. It'll show all of the scan events and scanning information, and they'll show any of the recurring, non-recurring, and other durations of time. So the daily details provides a line-by-line description of the day. This is kind of what resembles the PS Form 3999. It shows step-by-step, sector segment by sector segment, all of the address ranges, event types, and the times that are associated with those. What time did they enter that sector segment? What time did they leave? How many scans did they do? And the team has the ability to edit those times if they need to. It identifies the number of active deliveries. So events and delivery times in DSR are automatically flagged when they exceed certain parameters. So let me be clear here. This is not that they're automatically deducting any time from a letter carrier. The goal of these flags are not to deduct anything. These are simply visual cues for the teams to look at these events and say, hey, is this time allocated properly? Because the goal is to make sure that if I'm doing something out on the route, that I get credit for the proper thing. Is this travel time actually supposed to be parcel time? So that the team can go in and look at it and make sure that if it is parcel time, they get credit for parcel time. So we took a year's worth of data from 3999 inspection data, and we looked at what the averages were across the nation in order to develop these visual cues, these parameters that you see here, and they're also in the MOU. So over the course of a year, on the average, city carriers across the country utilize 22 minutes of loading time. Now we understand that in lots of places, it's a lot more than that, and in some places it might be a lot less. But this was just a general average starting point for the teams to look at. That doesn't mean it's gonna stay 22 minutes or that you're only allocated 22 minutes. That's not accurate. It's whatever time you utilize for loading time. This is simply just a flag for the guys to look at, or girls. Unloading time was 7 minutes. Signature required scan was 3. Relay time was on the average about 1 minute and 35 seconds. Delivered or other scans were about 1 minute. That doesn't mean you only get 1 minute for a delivered scan. That just was what it was on the average for that time period. Miscellaneous other, stationary time, it was 7 minutes on the average for most letter carriers across the country. And then we also did based on certain delivery types, if it's a curb line delivery, if it's a centralized delivery, and we identified some averages for those as well. So all of those times get the ability to be edited by the team if necessary. The teams discuss, they identify, they review all of the events, and they determine whether or not they need to make any corrections to the allocation of time. All these items here that you see here are things that would show up in a traditional 3999 process. When we started looking at this technology, the definitions in DSR were somewhat different from what a traditional 3999 process was. We were very, very strict with the Postal Service that we need these to be matching. We need to know that a carrier is getting credit for every activity that they do out on the route. So we went back and we modified the technology with our Postal Service partners to make sure that every single event that a letter carrier does throughout the course of their day was able to be identified in DSR so that we could allocate time to it if necessary. Now there are a few of these events that are things that aren't on a traditional 3999, but we felt that they were important, so we wanted to include those as well. But you'll see here we have things like backtracking, customer contact, load, unload time, lunch, management time, all the traditional things on the $39.99. There was the one inside the delivery unit that's a little bit different that doesn't typically show up on a $39.99, but we felt that it was important to know that because so many times letter carriers throughout the course of the day will have to go back to the delivery unit and they'll have to retrieve other parcels, or maybe they have to go back and pick up their auxiliary assistants. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to give them credit for that time as well. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Tim McKay, and he's going to tell you a little bit about some of the people that are involved in this process.
All right, good morning. So what we want to do next is go over the structure that was put into place for oversight of the TIAREAP process. So what we have put at the headquarters level, we have what's called a national oversight team. At our 4 USPS areas and our 15 NBA regions, we have area regional teams, or ARTs. For our 50 USPS districts, we have DLTs, which are our district lead teams. Also within those 50 districts, we have route evaluation and adjustment teams, or REATs. And then throughout the many delivery units throughout the country where the evaluations will take place, we have what's called our local office contacts, which are very, very important to us, and we'll get into that shortly, exactly why that is. So our national oversight team consists of 1 NALC representative and 1 USPS representative. The NALC representative, who happens to be Michelle, was selected by President Orlando. Her counterpart at USPS headquarters is Bob Sutar, and he was selected by the Vice President of Delivery Operations. Their main goal is to oversee this process at the national level. In addition to that, though, they work tirelessly to put this whole thing together. They've developed training materials that they've traveled around the country to teach our area regional team members, our district lead team members, our route evaluation and adjustment team members, and soon to be our carrier optimal routing technicians. So they, as we just stated, they jointly conduct this training, them with a lot of other people involved in this process. And one of their other goals is to oversee the area regional team members. One of the things that's very important in this process is we have an alternate dispute resolution process, or a way to address any issues that we have with it. So one of the things that Michelle and Bob are tasked with doing, if the area regional team members are unable to resolve an issue at their level, it'll come to Michelle and Bob. So as I stated below, that are the area regional teams. Again, we have 1 NALC and 1 USPS member. The NALC member in each of our regions was selected by our national business agent. The USPS counterpart was selected by the Director of Field Operations Support. Some of the responsibilities of those individuals is to certainly monitor the process, the workload, make sure we're achieving the timelines that we've set for ourselves to get these evaluations and potential adjustments conducted in a timely manner. They oversee, communicate, and track the progress of those district lead teams as well as the REATs. If there's any issues, or they communicate that to Michelle and Bob. Certainly along the way, Michelle and Bob are going to be reaching out to the area regional teams to see the progress of the teams that are within the 50 districts. And one of their goals, as I stated, is before Michelle and Bob would deal with any issues from the area regional teams are going to deal with any issues that are elevated to them by the district lead teams. If there's an issue that they can't handle at this level, within 3 working days, they are to elevate that to the national oversight team. So the district lead teams, again, we have 50 USPS districts. Within those 50 USPS districts, we have 1 NALC representative and 1 USPS representative. Those individuals are appointed by the NBA, and again, that Director of Field Operations Support. Some of their responsibilities are to also oversee the process, adhere to the timelines within their own district. We had a selection period. Michelle's going to go into this in more in depth here in a little bit about our various selection periods, but we just had a selection period. One of the duties of the district lead teams was to select the zones within their district that would go through the evaluation process. It's very important that they prioritize and schedule those zones because in some of the districts we have a lot of work to do, so you have to prioritize exactly where they're going to fall into the process. They also assign the route evaluation and adjustment teams to those selected zones and certainly track their progress, how they're going along. There's a live week of data collection. It's the responsibility of the district lead team members to select that live week. So they also are responsible for verifying any post-adjustment based data in those. Make sure that data is correct. If we go into an office or a zone or a route and we adjust that, we want to make sure that the evaluation that was given and the adjustment that was given to that route is recorded properly in the USPS programs. And they also, one of the other responsibilities of the district lead team members, they don't just oversee the route evaluation adjustment teams, they also may perform read duties themselves as necessary. Certainly they need to communicate with the area regional team members, especially when the 3999s are needed, how the scheduling of the reads is going, and if there's any impasse issues, meaning there's any problems that they can't resolve at their level, they need to elevate that to the area regional team members. They also are responsible for ensuring that the core technicians are available when it comes time to adjust the routes. The core technicians, and we're going to explain those briefly here in a few as well, as that's one USPS member, one NALC member. They're also responsible for ensuring that DSR data is available in each of these zones. If for some reason the DSR data is not available, they need to immediately report that to the area regional team members. They're also responsible for ensuring that the core data prep is reviewed and complete by the core technician. Make sure that the PS Form 3999 process is followed. There's a process that we've put in place with all of our alternate route adjustment processes that ensures that if a 3999 is conducted, whether in this process, whether it's digital or whether it's actual, that there's certain things that the Postal Service must do. There's a local stand-up talk that was created for this to inform the individuals, the letter carriers in the delivery units that we're going to be performing evaluations on that ensure that this stand-up talk is given to them. There's also a local office pre-evaluation questionnaire that we created to ask the local office contacts of certain issues or problems that might be going on in their office that the REITs would need to know about. The DLTs are responsible for ensuring that that happens as well. So one of the things that we put into place with this is after evaluations, potential adjustments are created, and Michelle's definitely going to get into this shortly, but we have put into place a post-adjustment review of that evaluation. So one of the responsibilities of the DLTs is to make sure that that's conducted. So let's get into the route evaluation and adjustment team members. So part of our memorandum of understanding M1982 is there will be a minimum of 5 teams per USPS district. So we have 200, at a minimum, 250 teams. One of those teams are the DLTs, the district lead teams that I just spoke about. So in addition to the DLTs, we have a minimum of 4 route evaluation and adjustment teams. So those team members are, for us, they're appointed by the MBA, certainly with the assistance from the branch presidents. Some of the responsibilities are obviously understanding the MOUs and all aspects of the process, and they certainly do have a good understanding of that, considering they go through a week-long training at the various locations throughout the country. They need to have frequent communication with the local office contacts. I think I've already said it once, and I'll probably say it again. The information that the evaluation teams receive from the local office contacts, the assistance that they receive from the local office contacts is very crucial to what they're trying to accomplish, and that's to give everybody a fair evaluation. So they certainly have frequent communication with those local office contacts, explaining the process, explaining the duties of the local office contacts, providing that local office pre-evaluation questionnaire and ensuring that that's completed. ensuring that the stand-up talk is provided, scheduling carrier consultations both during the live week, during the evaluation adjustment, and if necessary, they're responsible for assisting with scheduling traditional PS Form 3999s in the event that they're unable to create their own 3999 through the DSR process. Also, they must assist the local office contacts with any issues related to the TIAREAP process. So if there's an issue at the local and the locals can't fix the problem, they would certainly elevate that to the route evaluation and adjustment teams for possible resolution. So the route evaluation and adjustment team also conduct the evaluation, review all data for anomalies and data integrity issues. This is where they really get into evaluating, right? They're looking at all the data. So they want to make sure that the data that they're looking at is accurate, that it's not flawed. If it is, they jointly agree to remove the anomalies. As stated earlier, I believe Brian mentioned it, part of this process, and we actually wrote it into the agreement, is that we made the commitment that we were going to maximize the use of this DSR technology to the extent possible. So one of their responsibilities is to make sure that they do that. They also want to make sure that the PS Form 3999 process is followed, and you can create PS Form 3999 DSRs when possible. They conduct joint carrier consultations and facilitate with adjustments in conjunction with the core technicians. Again, they also are responsible, just like everybody else is in this process, to ensure that their own timelines that they set for themselves are being followed. If there are any issues identified on the pre-evaluation questionnaire, make sure that those issues are addressed, and make sure that they're taken into account when they perform their evaluations. Excuse me. So they also want to make sure that the local office contacts, whatever's required of them, that those things are performed. Make sure that the unit records and base data are updated post-adjustment, and if necessary, any issues that they can't address at their level, make sure those quickly get elevated to the DLT. So let's talk about the local office contacts. So the local office contacts are one NALC and one USPS representative. From our side, that individual is selected by the branch president. And for the Postal Service side, that individual is selected by the USPS district managers. So we certainly, like Ryan stated earlier, if you have any involvement in this process, we certainly encourage you to read the MOUs, become very familiar with them. That way you have a good understanding of exactly how the process works and exactly what might be expected of you at the local level. Some of the things that are going to be required from the local office contacts and ask for your assistance is that you certainly have that pre-evaluation questionnaire completed and returned to them. Provide them with a current seniority list. Certainly discuss with them, make them aware of any types of vacancy or replacement carrier information that they would need to know. Certainly tell them of any potential data integrity issues that might be going on in your office. As you can understand, that's going to be very crucial to whether or not they provide a proper and fair evaluation. Any PS Form 3999 data, make sure that that's available to them, and assist them with any territory adjustments. When it comes time for us to possibly adjust routes in those zones, nobody knows that territory better than you all. So we're also going to ask you all as local office contacts to communicate be that communication between the REITs and the local parties, so kind of like that liaison between everyone involved. So think about the carriers, the supervisors, the stewards, the postmasters, and station managers. We want to make sure that the communication between the REITs and everybody involved at the local level is completed. That that carrier, that stand-up talk that we spoke about earlier, we're going to ask you all to perform that stand-up talk jointly in your office. When it comes time to provide the evaluated times and perform an adjustment consultation, we're going to ask you all to assist with that. During this process, we've put a rule into place that all work hour workload data must be posted daily in each of the delivery units. The reason for that is we want the letter carriers who are being evaluated to see their data on a daily basis so they can point out any possible data integrity issues to you all. I'm going to ask that you all please make sure that that's happening in your office. If it's not, then we need to address that issue through the process. When it comes time to the adjustment consultation, if an adjustment's made to a letter carrier's route, we're going to ask the local office contacts to provide that PS Form 1840 reverse to that individual prior to the consultation so they can review the proposed adjustments. And we're going to ask you all to validate core-generated travel times. What that means is, we have agreements in place that if any travel to, travel from, or travel within has been generated by core, we want to make sure that that time is actual, that it's fair. So we're going to ask you all to go out and validate those times. So the core technicians, carrier optimal routing, that's what core stands for. So core, for any of you all that might not understand that, that's a USPS program that we've used a lot in the past, especially whether it's unilateral or these joint adjustments to generate letter carriers routes within a delivery unit. With that being said, the core program, there's a lot of variables that go into it, and from our standpoint, we certainly want our hand in that, so to speak, cookie jar. So what we have negotiated into these agreements is that if we are going to use core in this joint process, we're also going to have a core technician involved in that process. It's the same thing that we've done in previous alternate adjustment processes, and we're fortunate to have some very, very good core techs on the NALC side. So they're very important to how this process functions. So the core techs are, again, a team of two, one from the Postal Service and one from NALC. These individuals are also appointed by the National Business Agent and that Director of Field Operational Support. Their very, very important responsibilities are to ensure that that core data prep is completed prior to performing any adjustment. They're also responsible for completing the territory adjustment scenarios using, with the assistance of the DLTs, the route evaluation and adjustment team members, and most certainly the local office contacts. They also provide that PS Form 1840 reverse to the DLT, the read for distribution to the local office contacts. They also provide any necessary core reports for the DLT and the reads to review. Those are the players of the TIAREAP process. And now let's get into the actual process itself.
So Tim stole a lot of my thunder, but that's okay. So what does the TIAREAP process cover? So it applies to all routes which include casing and delivery of mail. It excludes those parcel post routes and collection routes that are 100% parcel post or 100% collection. If there's any casing and delivery of mail, if it's a combination route, it falls under this process. So this is the only game in town, folks. This is the only evaluation and adjustment process that's going to be used on city carrier routes for the duration of this agreement. So what's included in the Memorandum of Understanding? Just a basic overview. It includes some zone selection and data analysis periods. It includes the requirement to review the volume, the office and street times for anomalies, make sure that all that's accurate. Office and street evaluations are going to be created using DOAS and DSR, as well as whatever other information the teams decide to utilize. It requires that we do carrier consultations. It requires the adjustment process be followed under the M39. And it also incorporates an automatic review. Since this is new technology, we wanted to make sure that we get it right. So we incorporated an automatic review process in this MOU. So zone selections. Zones are selected by the DLTs with input from the branch presidents, the MBAs, and the regional offices. There are 3 selection periods. We just concluded the July selection period. And then we're going to do 2 more throughout the lifetime of the agreement. The ones that we just opted in July will most likely be evaluated and adjusted this fall. And then in October, we're going to select zones for spring evaluation and adjustment. And then in the following May, we'll select zones for the following fall. So once a zone has been opted in, all routes in that zone will be evaluated. Does that mean that all routes in the office are going to be evaluated? Maybe not. You may have 2 or 3 or 5 zip codes within a delivery unit, but maybe only one of them has been opted into the process because we felt that the routes were out of adjustment in that zone, but the other zones were okay. But if you get a zone that's opted in, all the routes in that zone are going to be evaluated. So outside of the selection period, the DLTs have the option of mutually agreeing to opt in a zone if they choose to, but they can only do it by mutual agreement of the parties. So once a zone has been evaluated, the DLTs might agree that no adjustments are necessary. Maybe they go in and they look at all the data and they determine that, these routes are in pretty good shape. Everything's about as close to 8 hours as it should be, so we're just not gonna do anything. We're just gonna, determine that it's adjusted properly. So this data analysis period, what's included in that? Well, we did it like we did similarly to other RAPS processes that we've had in the past. We included 7 weeks of historical data from the 7 months immediately prior to the live week. Rather than drawing random lots for each individual zone, we decided this time around we were just going to draw random lots one time, and that we would utilize that in all the zones across the country. That way it just made it a little bit easier, one less thing that the DLTs had to do. So we drew some random lots at the national level. So we're going to use those 7 random weeks from the 7 months, plus we're going to use a live week of DSR data collection, which will be jointly selected by the district lead teams. June, July, August, and December are excluded from both of those selections. We are not going to utilize any data from June, July, August, and December in these zones that are opted in during the selection period, because we never have, so we're not going to. So what is this live week of data collection we've been talking about? Well, the DLTs are going to select a week, and they're going to have the carriers perform the route as they normally would. There's no change to what the letter carrier does during the live week of data collection. They go out, they deliver their route, and they come back. There is virtually no intrusion on their time or anything different. There's no inspector walking with them, there's no additional people in the office doing paperwork, no one counting their mail volume. It's simply they go out and deliver the route like they always do. So the only difference about the live week is that we now have teams that are going to be able to see that data the next day in current conditions. They're going to look at the DSR data. They're going to make any necessary edits after they've consulted with the carrier, because we want to make sure that that time is recorded properly. So the only thing the carrier has to do differently during the live week is they need to have the opportunity, well, they don't need to, but we want them to have the opportunity to come in and talk to the team and let them know, hey, what happened out on my route yesterday? If the team has any questions about what they saw in the data, it's the carrier's opportunity to let them know all the particular information that applies to their route. Because every route's different. And the only person that knows all the idiosyncrasies and all the different things is the regular carrier on the route. So we want to make sure we give them the opportunity to talk about what happened during that live week with the team. And then we're going to create a PS Form 3999 DSR from one of those representative days after we consult with them. None of our teams are going to create those 3999s for moving territory until the carriers had an opportunity to explain, hey, this is what happened during my day. This is where I went. This is why I went there. This is what I did. So evaluation times. The REIT teams will select representative office and street times using the regular carrier or mutually agreed upon replacement carrier data. So their office evaluations are similar to every other route process we've ever done. There's been no change with that whatsoever. They're going to select either the DOAS work hour workload data from the 7 random weeks plus the live week. And they're going to select whichever is lower, the actual average office time during the evaluation period that the carrier demonstrated, or the standard office time for the route based on 18, 8, and 70 plus the fixed office time. Virtually everybody in this process is probably going to get their demonstrated ability. I think we have seen most often, probably higher than 90% of the time, carriers get their demonstrated office performance. It's very rare that we use standard, but it does come into play sometimes on auxiliary routes, or if you have a route that's been vacant for some time, or if there's some other anomaly. Street evaluations. So the street evaluated times, the REIT will choose to use either the DSR average street time for the 7 random weeks plus the live week, so a total of 8 weeks, or they'll utilize the average street time for that live week. So most carriers involved in this process will get at a minimum 3 consultations. These consultations are going to be conducted virtually by the REIT teams or the DLTs via Zoom. They're going to get a live week consultation where they can give feedback to the teams on the DSR recorded activities. And then the reads can edit those events based on the carrier's input. They may do 2 or 3 consultations during that live week. It's just whatever the team determines they need in order to evaluate and make sure that that time is allocated properly for the carrier. So the second consultation in the process is an evaluation consultation. Once the teams have edited all that data and they've come up with their evaluated times, they give that information to the local office contacts to provide to the carrier, and then they're going to have a conversation with the carrier and say, hey, what do you think? Is this your office time? Does this accurately reflect about what time you spend in the office? And what about your street time? Does this seem right? Is this about what you normally do out on the street? And that gives the carrier the opportunity to provide their input on those times. And then the third type of consultation that we do during this process is the adjustment consultation. The PS Form 1840 reverse, which is generated most often in core, is going to be provided to the carrier by the local office contacts at least 1 day prior to their consultation. Because we want to make sure they have a chance to look it over, see what it says, get some idea what territory is being moved, if any, make sure that those times make sense. And then we're going to give a consultation with them so they can give their feedback on the proposed territory changes or the adjusted route times prior to any of those adjustments being finalized. It's the carrier's opportunity to say, hey, it doesn't make sense for me to add this street because I'm driving through 3 routes to get to it. You know, maybe there are those times when sometimes those little things happen, and we want to make sure we get it right. So the adjustment process. The adjustment process is no different than anything that we've done in previous RAPs. It's guided by the M39, section 243. So the current PS Form 3999 is going to be used for moving territory. These are the 3999s that are done after consultation with the carrier from that live week. We want to make sure that we have a consultation. We are not going to use any 3999 in this process without consulting with that carrier first and making the necessary edits to make sure that that 3999 is accurate before it goes into core for adjustment. So core data prep is very, very important in this process. We're going to use core if the data prep is current and complete. That's why we have core technicians, one on each side, to make sure that that core data prep is complete and that the adjustment is done properly. They're going to utilize those local office contacts. Those are probably the most important people in this process is our local office contacts, because they're the ones that are going to be able to identify what territory needs to be moved, what makes sense, so that they can assist with this adjustment. The route evaluation team also participates in the adjustment process, and they have the final approval on any adjustments. No adjustment is going to go into place in any zone opted into this process unless our REIT teams are in agreement that this is the proper adjustment and it accurately reflects a fair and equal distribution of the workload for city carriers. So what happens after the adjustment? Well, after the adjustment, we're going to make sure that all the base data is recorded properly in DOIS and that it reflects what the parties have agreed to. The local office contacts have the ability to submit to the district lead teams if there are any, minor territory changes that need to be made. Maybe after we implement, we realize that, hey, half of this block got credited the wrong way. Maybe the curb line boxes are actually on the other side of the street. Those minor glitches do happen. And so they can submit that to the DLTs so we can get all of those issues fixed. And once that's approved by the DLTs, then we'll record and update all of the base data and make sure that that's done properly. So as indicated earlier, because this is new technology, in the past we have always made the zones request for a review. This time around, we're going to make sure that we automatically review every adjustment that we do. We just want to make sure that we get it right. So the DLTs are going to review every adjustment within 90 days after implementation. Within those 90 days, they're going to start looking at work hour workload data just to see if the workload's evenly distributed, if it looks like we did a good job, or if there are a couple of things that maybe we need to go back in and we need to tweak a few things. So they're going to utilize the data from days 60 through 90 post-implementation, and they're going to assign potentially a REIT team to go in and perform an evaluation and adjustment if necessary. However, we know in some cases maybe things don't implement exactly on time, or maybe there's some other data issue that comes up. We know that, so we wanted to give the REITs the ability to utilize a different time period if necessary. So during the review process, again, all of the routes are going to be evaluated just to make sure everybody is where they need to be. But only those routes that need to have those minor tweaks done are the ones that are going to be adjusted to get them as close to 8 hours as possible. We don't want to disrupt routes that are already adjusted properly. We want to make sure that we only fix the ones that need to be fixed. So what about locally developed processes? Well, there are some locally developed processes across the country. We know that, where places have put their own joint processes in place, right? So if there was a joint process in place prior to the signing of the MOU, and there was an adjustment that was in progress, we're going to allow them to go ahead and implement those. At this point, all of those should have already been implemented. But those routes fall under the review process. We want to make sure that we, again, got it right. So they're subject to the TIAREAP review process. And then in all other zones, locally developed processes, maybe going forward, can be submitted to the National Oversight Team for approval through the alternate evaluation and adjustment process. So Tim talked a little bit about the issue resolution process, and this is kind of our hierarchy again. It's the same basic thing. If the REITs have an issue, they refer it to the DLTs immediately so that it can potentially be resolved at the DLT level. We want issues to be resolved at the lowest level, just like we do in the grievance process. But if they can't resolve at the DLT level, then they're going to have to send that up within 2 working days. We want to get this done quickly so that we can move forward in these zones and make sure that these routes get adjusted as quick as possible. If they can't resolve at that level, then the ARTs have 3 working days to get it to the National Oversight Team. So if the area regional teams aren't able to come to an agreement on whatever the issue is, they'll send it up to Bob and I, and then we've got 4 working days to make a decision. So what's next in the process? So we've conducted 4 joint training sessions already. We've trained all of our DLTs, we've trained most of our REITs. We did that in the months of June and July, and the dates are there. We're getting ready to train our core techs. They're going to go to the William F. Bolger Center in Maryland and train the week of August the 29th for all 50 districts. So the zone selection period is over for the month of July, and the zones have been selected. So now we're going to start notifying those USPS selections and the NALC selections of the zones that have been opted into the selection period. The NBAs and the branch presidents are going to start choosing their local office contacts in each of these locations. The route evaluation and adjustment teams are going to start reaching out to those local office contacts. They're going to notify them of things like when their live week is scheduled. They're going to ask them to start compiling that information that's relevant to the route evaluation and adjustment. You know, all the things that Tim talked about, the local office contacts, you know, things like the seniority list, the questionnaire, all of those things. And then the REITs are also going to let the local office contacts know when those consultations are going to start on the live week, the evaluation and the adjustment. The local office contacts are going to start providing those joint stand-up talks. We want them to give those stand-up talks pretty close to the time period when they're getting ready for their live week, so that's fresh in everybody's mind. So maybe that week before the live week, they're going to start giving those stand-up talks. The local office contacts are going to provide those office and street evaluations to the carriers in the zones that are opted in, that are for evaluation. And they're going to provide those 1840Rs to the carriers for the adjustment consultation. So what do carriers need to know about this process? Carriers need to know that their login and setup on their MDDTR, that is key to this process, so that we can ensure that we record the time and allocate it properly. We want to encourage them to do proper scanning events in the proper locations. If I have a red, identified stationary event on the DSR, and my management counterpart comes to me and says, hey, why is this carrier sitting still? If I can see that the carrier's got the scanner on and they're walking up to a house to deliver a parcel, I can make sure that they get allocated time for that event. It's so important for carriers to get credit for absolutely everything that they do during the course of their day. So we want to encourage them to make those proper scan events in those locations. You know, we know that with all the parcel volume that we have right now, it's impossible to carry all of those spurs in your bag. We're hopping off spurs all the time and taking parcels up to the door after the loop, before the loop, on the way to the loop. We want to make sure that carriers get credit for every single second of work that they do every single day. So we want to encourage them to do that. And during the live week, we want to make sure that they perform their duties and the route like they normally do. The cool thing about DSR is if I have a carrier telling me in the consultation, hey, I only take one street break every day because I just feel so much pressure to get the route done, I typically skip one of my breaks. I can see that now in the system. I can see in DSR if that carrier is actually only taking one street break, and I can make sure he gets credit for 2 going forward, or she gets credit for 2 street breaks going forward, because we want to build that time into the route because they're entitled to it. We don't want to take that away. So our feedback from our carriers that are involved in this process is so vitally important. We need to get some candid feedback during the consultation. That's the carrier's opportunity to tell the team, hey, this is what I do every single day. And they're going to see it and they're going to understand. And it's a good opportunity for them to have that open, frank conversation with their team. Encourage them to do that. Let them know, hey, we've got a union guy sitting at the table in that room with you, or a union gal that's going to protect you is part of this process. Let them know it's okay to say whatever you need to say during that consultation. It's not a gotcha. We're not going to go in there and say, why were you sitting still for 20 minutes? That's not what it's about. It's about saying, hey, you know what? It looks like you're delivering at a centralized delivery here, you know, and it might have taken you some time. Is that in fact, you know, what you do? Are there a bank of NDCBUs there? We're able to see that in this process, where before management would always say, hey, that scanner's not moving, they're not doing anything. That's not true. In this process, with this technology, we can identify that, hey, there's a bank of NDCBUs there. That carrier's not just sitting still, they're replenishing their mail. It's the carrier's opportunity to provide that feedback. Those consultations are crucial to a good evaluation and adjustment. So with that, we've given you a lot of information this morning, and now I am going to open it up for questions and answers, and I'm happy to do that. So if you want to go up to the mic and identify who you are. And if I can't answer them, then we'll make Tim do it.
Dave Rice, branch 2184, Western Wayne County. And your talk seemed to indicate.
Can you step a little forward for me?
Okay.
There you go.
In your talk, you seem to indicate that determining the office time is the standard or the lower, the demonstrated. But you seem to imply that demonstrated can also be more than the standard. You know, so if I'm not making my office time, and there's a reason for it, perhaps I have a lot of movement on my route, a lot of hold mail and so forth, I can get that demonstrated value automatically.
The way that MOU is written is it's the lesser of the two, what average or fixed office time. If there are anomalies that are created within your delivery unit that might impact that, that's something that you're going to want to let the local office contacts know, and make sure that the REITs know when they're doing your evaluation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Chevelle Evans, Branch 11, Chicago. My biggest concern, obviously, and I've been on a JRAP, or I was on JRAP, and been involved with most of the processes, especially in my station concerns, as a steward, AMS, and otherwise. But the biggest issue is a lot of my carriers, especially, and I'm assuming in other areas too, of how much deviation carriers do and the order of the way they do their route, and the amount of time they set up to make, you know, basically carriers want to be out there and get it done like that. So they cut out a lot of this time where you're trying to allot that time for each specific relay. And I know we let them know what this process deals with, and now they're gathering so much pertinent information through this scanner. If a carrier continues to abuse that process while they're building up all this data, come time to that route to get adjusted, how is it going to be looked at, or how is it going to be determined is the sample size going to be even smaller because you might only have a few weeks of time, including perhaps that live week, versus the whole entire 8 weeks?
Okay, so the teams have the ability to select alternate time periods if they need to. If there's some anomaly with the identified random lots that have been drawn at the national level, then the teams can look at other weeks. They can look at other time periods to make sure that they get a proper evaluation. DSR records what the carrier does, what their activities are, actually what they do every single day. So it's going to give them time for how they perform the route every single day. It doesn't identify the line of travel based on what the AMS edit book says or based on the way the case labels are set up. DSR records what the carrier does, how they travel, and how they perform delivery.
So basically, it'll piece it together regardless
Yes.
of that time.
Yep.
Okay, very quick, thanks.
You're welcome.
Yes, good morning. Dave Savell, branch 3825, Rockville, Maryland.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for the workshop. I was wondering on questions. A question is, a lot of times my route, my scanner thinks I'm a quarter mile, a half a mile away.
Okay.
And that might be another route. It may not even be on mine. What are they going to do with using the GPS and it's trying to evaluate my street time on, for example, whatever, street 59, and I'm actually, it's not on my route. They think I'm off my route.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about DSR. DSR is completely different from the RIM system. When your scanner tells you you're in the wrong location for a sampling request or the wrong location for a package delivery, those coordinates are populated by a different system that uses 1-minute breadcrumbs and different geo coordinates, and it's just a whole different thing. Has nothing to do with what we do in DSR. DSR, we have evolved significantly on our delivery points and our mapping of our data and our breadcrumbs, and it's much, much better than those messages that come from a different system.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is James Gremko, branch 40, Cleveland, Ohio. My question is around the street evaluations. Do they take into account for businesses and safety? Because a lot of times they want to put business at the beginning of the route. Cores sometimes will put it in the middle of the route or something like that, and they readjust it to the beginning of the route. Now you end up with travel time, the deadhead to your business. And some safety are like streets, for instance, that where we're located, we get rush hour in the evening, and especially in wintertime when it's dark out. You want to do that street early in the day, but you might have to deadhead to get to it. It's one of those type of streets that are narrow. It's not a matter of if you're going to get hit, it's when you're going to get hit. So if you do it in the morning, chances are you're not going to get hit. If you do it in the evening, they take those into account because they're going to do when they change. Because I've done route adjustments and I worked with the boss and I was able to tell him which streets, the reason why they're doing it in that order. And then, so when you adjust a new route, you're able to. They're going to take all that into account.
Well, CORE identifies the line of travel and sets up the line of travel, but if you have those types of issues, that's certainly something that you're going to want to talk about during your adjustment consultation. You're going to want to let them know, hey, on this particular section of the route, that's something that, it has businesses, they don't open till 11 or something like that, so that they know when they go to do that adjustment process that they can take that into consideration.
And last time we ran through course, they put all our numbers numerically in order, even though that was in the order of delivery.
That's why we have a technician on our side to make sure that those errors get corrected.
And like a lot of routes, we end up putting apartments at the end because at nighttime, in the winter, it gets dark. This way, we're at the apartments and have lights. Because when you're driving, some of these streets don't have lights. And you're constantly turning your dome light on and off to be able to see what's in front of you. That's a safety reason, so they take that into account.
Well, we will do our best to do as much as we can with that type of stuff, but once an adjustment has been implemented, then that would be something that you would want to have conversation with your local manager and say, look, this line of travel needs to be changed because it's just not safe for me to perform it that way.
Okay, so let's say a line of travel ends up costing an extra 10, 15 minutes. Are they going to throw that in there?
They may not. Yeah, it just depends. It's going to be a case by case basis. Yeah.
Because I've heard 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It cost me 10 minutes now.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Good morning. My name is Deborah Hurd from local branch 567 in Alexandria, Virginia. And my question is, do they take into account
I live in Alexandria. That's awesome.
take into account carriers that have injuries and that are on limited duty. And like even including myself, I don't do a certain portion of my route.
Okay.
It will take additional time in the office to prepare it so that it can go to another place, and I don't do all of my route, and some of the other ones don't either. So how are they gonna allocate that, or how are they gonna?
Okay, so that's part of the reason why that local office information is so very, very important, right? And why you have that opportunity to have those consultations. What we can do, utilizing DSR, which is also another cool tool or feature of this program, is that if a carrier works only a portion of the route, or maybe they can only work, say 4 hours on the street, but then they can carry the other 4 hours the next day, we can piece that together and use that demonstrated performance to create a virtual picture of the entire route. The MOU requires that any auxiliary assistance that's performed on any regular route also be included as part of that evaluation process. So if you're not able to carry the entire route, we're going to take whatever auxiliary assistance, we're going to evaluate that, and we're going to add it to that route evaluation.
Right, and because of those injuries or illness, they still may, you may not be able to just go in an expedited manner because it ain't gonna happen.
Right, exactly.
Your own safety.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The cool thing too about DSR, and Tim just reminded me to make sure I tell you guys this, is, we don't worry about your clock reads. We don't need to know whether or not the clock reading data is correct or accurate. It's not really, the only thing that DSR measures is what you do and your activities out on the route. So if we have a day where we have clock readings that show that you spent 6 hours in the office and an hour and a half on the street, that doesn't mean we can't use the data from that day, because we still have that virtual picture of what your day looked like. And we're able to determine, what your office time was and what your street time was based on seeing that virtual day. So it's not, those clock ring anomalies that we used to have to deal with before, and not being able to see if somebody, performed an assist on your route because maybe they didn't clock to it. We can see that now using this program. If I'm giving away an hour and a half of my assignment to somebody else and they didn't make a clock ring, and I'm not getting credit for that on my route, using this program, we do. Because we can see every carrier, whether they just went in to deliver an express mail, I can see that they went into my territory on my route and delivered something and get credit for it.
No.
Yes.
Gerard Perry, Branch 404, Waco, Texas. My question is kind of a two-part question. Texas is hot as hell.
Yes.
They're gonna take the lower.
Here lately, every day has been over 100 degrees. The scanner freezes up, shuts down, it'll just freeze up, reboot, cut off for the day. You might have to go back to the office and get a whole nother scanner. Where is that data going?
It still gets downloaded once the device gets cradled at the end of the day. That data will still get downloaded. In the event, for whatever reason, there's some that's missing for any given day, the team can look at whatever day they want. They can look at a different time period. If there's one day during that live week, like say Tuesday, that for whatever reason your data doesn't get collected or downloaded properly, then the team can look at Wednesday, or they can look at Thursday, or they can look at Friday. They're going to look at every day during the live week, and then they're going to look at the 7 random weeks. So if there is data that's missing, then they can look at an alternate time period to see what the evaluation might be.
Okay, the next question is, everywhere is shorthand. So some officers are working 12, 13 hours a day. Those batteries don't last. You gotta go back and get another battery, or sometimes management take just deliver it and don't scan it. So you're not gonna get a complete evaluation of the route.
It still will have a begin time and an end time, so you're going to see the entire day, the total amount of the day for that day.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tracy Mulliner, branch number 2462, Van Nuys, California. As with prior RAP processes, will the local office contacts be allowed in the consultations? And if the carrier requests to have the local office contact in there?
There's no prohibition for the local office contact to be in with the route evaluation and adjustment team. So if you have The goal is for the carrier to be able to have that one-on-one conversation without any interference from anybody else. Whether it be a manager or whether it be, the steward on our side or the local office contact. We want them to feel like they can have a candid conversation with the route evaluation and adjustment team. Now, having said that, we have had circumstances where they say, hey, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing this without my local in here, and they'll allow the local to come in and be part of that consultation. We've also alternately had situations where the carrier said, hey, I want my supervisor in here because I'm not comfortable using their computer or using this Zoom program if they're not here with me. So we've had supervisors. The goal is to make sure that that carrier feels the most comfortable they can to provide the information we need.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Pat Nugent, 21 Branch 2189 Valley Street, New York. My question has to do with core. I know in the beginning when we were using core, it was a big problem, but with the union being involved, hopefully it'll help. My question is, like, they were eliminating relays. So then they would take the time, if you had a 25-stop relay, they would make it a 50-stop relay, and they would just deduct that time that you were spending at the back of the truck. But with the 50-stop relay, I'm not able to put packages in my bag, so now I'm not picking that time back up. I was wondering if, with the core technicians, are they gonna be doing something like that as they did previously?
Now that we have a joint core technician team, the goal is to be reasonable and to be fair to all letter carriers, right? We're not going to agree on an adjustment scenario that creates, a route that only has 3 relays when it needs to have 15 or 20. We're not going to agree to that. We're not going to agree to a bag weight that's 35 pounds. It's just, we're not going to. Yeah. So that's why we have a team of 2, to make sure that those core adjustments are fair. And if a scenario gets ran in core and the REIT team looks at the scenario and they say, hey, this ain't gonna cut it, go back to the drawing board and start over, because we're not in agreement that this is reflective of a fair evaluation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Perkins, Branch 459, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm gonna piggyback off what you all were saying a minute ago, and I'm wondering, when you do your live weeks, do you automatically evaluate to see what carrier went inside the geofencing, or do they have to tell you what carrier it was? Because you all said it's automatically going to show that somebody went inside their fencing for.
Oh yeah, it'll show the scanner ID and the ID, the employee ID number of whoever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but will you automatically do it without somebody telling you who the person was?
Yes, it shows in the program.
Okay, the next thing is, when you evaluating with the auxiliary assistants, people have different times. Like, for instance, my route, I give off auxiliary assistance every day. Will I be able to do my entire route during that live read so I can get accurate time?
Yes. Yes. As long as you don't have any medical limitations that would prohibit you from doing that, then yes, absolutely.
Okay, and will we be breaking it up from day to day, or will we be able to do the whole thing in one day?
It just depends. We certainly don't want to violate anybody's rights under the national agreement when it comes to Article 8. We don't want to force anybody into a mandatory overtime status. If, we want to make sure that if you're on the 8-hour list, you're on the 8-hour list. If your work assignment, then absolutely you can do the entire route.
But that will bring another question up, is if you breaking it up between days, that's going to put you in an area at a different time, which is going to make it a different time of delivery. Like the gentleman was saying, if you was to go through your whole route and by a certain time, you're going to have traffic at that time. Versus another time, they actually will alter how long it would take to deliver that part.
Right. Keep in mind, we are looking at an 8-week evaluation period. It's not just what you do during that live week. So if you have those types of anomalies during the live week, the team can rely heavily on that historical data as well to include that into your evaluation. So it's an average evaluation for the whole time period.
Now, in this situation we just outlined, there's 7-week evaluations. Basically, the historical data is put to the side because that wouldn't be accurate information, because it's different people doing that time. So that's why we were saying the carrier actually doing it, so the only accurate time you would actually have would be the live time.
And that's something that you can definitely tell the team during the consultation process, and would want to tell the team during the consultation process, so that they can take that into consideration when they're doing your evaluation.
So it would only be a consideration, it wouldn't be that they have to use a live time, is basically what you're saying.
They can, it's up to them what they choose. They can either choose to use the live week solely by itself, or they can choose to use the live week plus the 7 random weeks, whichever they feel is a better picture and evaluation of the route and what the regular carrier does on a day-to-day basis.
But we just stated that the historical data is not gonna have the regular carriers.
They're only gonna look at what the regular carrier's data is, plus the inclusion. We wanna make sure that they get that inclusion of the auxiliary assistance, that they get credit for that time. So we're gonna take that into consideration during that historical data. But if you come into the consultation and you tell the team, hey, look, during that historical data, they were given it away, I don't know who was carrying it, the scan is still gonna show. You know, the time that somebody else spent on your route is still gonna show, but the team is most likely gonna rely heavily on that live week data because you performed the route throughout the whole live week.
That'll work, appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Jeffrey Sigler, 825, Danville, Illinois. So with the local team, is that a person from every office?
It's going to be
The local contact.
the local office contact is going to be selected by the branch president, most likely, for that particular office, based on whatever zone we're being evaluated. There may be a local office contact for many of them, depending upon what the zone is. You know, if you have 6 or 8 zones within a facility, they may choose 6 or 8 different local office contacts.
Okay. And do they have to be a steward in
No.
an office? Okay.
Nope. It's just whoever's the most knowledgeable about the particular zone being evaluated and adjusted.
Okay, thank
You're
you.
welcome. Sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Wendy Jeter. I'm from South Suburban Merge Branch 4016. And my question is, you know, as the saying goes, put it where the goats can get it, right? So do we start the normal route adjustment process? If I have a route, I'm new to this route, you know, I believe after doing it for, you know, the required weeks in the 271G that it qualifies to get adjusted. Do I still do it the old-fashioned way? Fill out the paper and say, my name is Wendy, da-da-da-da, I'm requesting it. And then by doing it that way, what triggers next? Like what happens next? Does the core team come out? Do I have to wait till October? Like what happens?
All right. So for those of you that are leaving, can you just kind of hold it down a little bit, please? Thank you, so we can hear the questions. Okay, so nothing about TIAREAP changes the 271 process. If you have a route that you feel qualifies under the criteria of 271 because your route is overburdened, you submit your request to management just like you normally would. They will either approve or deny based on the criteria, you know, of whatever they find. If they approve it, then it goes into the TIAREAP process and the evaluation and adjustment is done by one of our joint teams. They will look at whatever data is available and they will conduct a live week as soon as possible because we don't want a letter carrier with an overburdened route waiting until, you know, the next selection period to get that adjustment that they're entitled to. We want to make sure that those 271s get processed properly and get done quickly. Now, if management denies a 271 improperly, then it goes through the grievance process like it normally would. And at the time that the grievance is resolved, if the DRT or, you know, the Formal A's or whoever resolves that a 271 is proper and that it needs to be evaluated and adjusted, at that point it goes to the district lead teams who will assign a READ team to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Stafford Price, Chicago, Branch 11.
Good morning.
My question, the parcel post, the combination routes, the parcel post is excluded from this process. So going into a zone with multiple combination routes that include the parcel posts and relays, how do we evaluate them if they're not in this process, or do we go back?
Combination routes are included in this process. Full parcel post routes are not included. So for routes that include casing and delivery of mail, whether they have 5 hours of parcel work or 2 hours of parcel work or whatever, if it includes casing and delivery of mail, they fall under this process. They will identify and evaluate and adjust that portion of the route that is traditional city delivery, and then they will also evaluate and come up to some agreed upon time for the collection portion or the parcel portion, and that it will go into the overall evaluation.
So the parcel post and collection portion is just the agreed upon time. It's nothing that will be looked at thoroughly, like an evaluated time.
Right, they're not gonna do any kind of an inspection or anything. It's part of it's gonna be included as part of the route's overall evaluation and part of the route's overall street time and overall office time. It's just not gonna go through a traditional inspection process.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Rick Bowe, Branch 46, Western Massachusetts. Do our REITs have the same access to all data collected by management? And are they provided that data prior to discussions and/or possible adjustments?
Yes.
Okay. And
Can they physically go into the computer and pull the information themselves? No. But they do have access to everything that management has access to.
so management provides that information for them?
Absolutely. And if there's ever a question where they feel that management is not providing the information, then we will deal with that appropriately. I will tell you right now, my 4 headquarters teams have never had that issue, not once, throughout these last over 14 months. Their teammates understand and they know this is a joint process. We are equal partners in this process. Whatever these guys ask for, they get automatically. There is no editing that's done of any anomalies. There's no editing in DSR that is done without mutual agreement of both sides, and both sides being present to do it. We have put in place fail-safes and timestamps and editing audit trails for the entire process where both sides are aware of anything that happens or changes.
Very good. My last question is, you showed that we were going to get stand-up talks. There's a questionnaire, but I didn't see anything about carrier training like we used to.
There's no actual training in this process because we don't want the carriers to do anything differently. We just want them to deliver their routes like they always do.
Even like with the 1838, we're not going to do that.
There are no 1838s in this process. The only time an 1838 might be conducted is if a team needs to determine a single line item for whatever reason. You know, maybe somebody says, hey, I need additional time for accountables. So the team might request an 1838 be done, but there's none of that volume data, there's no recording of office activities, none of that in this process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Colin Lumen, Branch 82, Portland, Oregon. I've been to some offices and filed grievances where the use of 733 parcel post time or 782 training time have skewed the data in that office for years. And I mean, to the point where, you know, numerous other full-time positions should have been created because that data is bad and gone. So how does this, my question is, how does this process deal with that data? If you're looking at the 7 or 8 weeks of prior historical data, and all of that data is bad.
Well, that would be a function of the local office contacts making sure to let their REIT teams know, hey, this time is missing. You know, we do this on a regular basis where we perform 733 or we perform under 782. And at that point, the team is going to start looking. They're going to start looking at operation codes and clock rings, and they're going to start looking at those mods transfers and those reports that show that, hey, there's a lot of 733 time here that shouldn't be.
Sure.
And then they're going to evaluate and adjust accordingly.
Okay, and so like even the use of the X routes, right?
Yes.
Those
Oh, absolutely.
phantom routes, because
Yeah,
that
the first
all
thing,
the time too.
yeah, the first thing we tell our teams to do is pull that route-based information report. See every possible assignment that there is within the delivery unit. And see, do they have X routes? Do they have phantom routes? Are there auxiliary routes? Because we want to make sure that we get an evaluation of all of the time that's in that zone.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that, because, I mean, it's likely that those places that have those phantom routes are the ones that are doing the other, you know, crazy stuff.
Yep, yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sure.
All right, good morning. Michael Bostic out of Newport News, Virginia, Branch 609. Wanted to ask about the pre-mapping or zone mapping where they prep before going into core. A couple of times they used to have these cortex for management go out, look at the one-ways and all the different nuances of the territory, the street. They never had anybody from the local area go out with them to kind of verify that and give some more insight to the area. Will they are they still doing that, or will they have somebody local go out with them prior to putting in the data into the core program?
Okay, so the core data prep process has changed organically over the years. It utilizes a lot more outside data, things like Google Maps and things like that to help populate that data prep process.
Okay.
There is a checklist that our core technicians will go through to make sure that all of that data prep is done and it's been completed prior to any core adjustment being initiated. But certainly if that kind of stuff shows up when they're doing the adjustment, they're gonna have to go back to the locals and say, hey, this looks funny, this isn't working right, you know, what's going on here? And then they'll adjust accordingly.
Okay, and then a small potatoes item. When I was Cortex, some Cortex in other areas used to have a little bit of access to actually physically touching the computer and doing the proprietary.
Right.
Will any of that possibly change, or is it still a proprietary issue?
It's still a proprietary issue at this point. Does that mean that anecdotally that might not happen somewhere out in the field? Yeah, it may. But as of right now, core licenses are subject to the Postal Service's purchase of that proprietary material. So.
And will management cease being able to take computers home with the program, or will it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the core adjustments, everything is going to be done jointly via Zoom, just like everything else, where we're going to be able to watch the whole process.
Okay, thank you kindly.
You're welcome.
Brian Whittakin, Branch 343, St. Louis. If no 1838Cs are being completed, how are we coming up with the data for the standard office time? And how are we coming up with the line item numbers for fixed office time?
So the fixed office time is whatever it was set at your last route inspection. Typically, it's either 33 or 43 minutes, depending upon whether or not you have an office break. Of course, the team can discuss whether or not that fixed office time is accurate and reflective, and they can make adjustments if they need to. Standard is based on 18, 8, and 70, as it always has been, and so there hasn't been any change to that. And that's based on the volumes that have been input into the system. If there are concerns that volume reporting isn't accurate and hasn't been done properly, most of our volume reporting now is automated. It's done by, the machines will do end of run reports and things like that. If there's concerns about the data integrity with the volumes, then absolutely the local office contacts need to let the teams know so that they can dig into it and do some investigation.
So like the hot case mail, are the management going to be instructed to piece count that, so that's put in for that day?
They should be doing that anyway. Yeah, they should be doing that anyway.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Monica Howard, Palatine Branch 4268. Couple questions. Let me start with the parcels. We get ours jumbled in with the spurs. Sometimes it takes you 15 minutes just to pull all the spurs out from underneath the parcels. Encasing them, you're only getting a minute for every 8 spurs into the case.
Okay.
Nobody can do that.
Okay, and that's probably true, and that's a conversation that you would have with your route evaluation and adjustment team and let them know, hey, we have to pull our spurs out from the bottom of the hamper, we have to separate those, we have to put those in the case, so you need to take that into consideration when you're looking at the office times.
And then question, when we're loading the truck with the spurs, they want everything loaded truck, how are you doing that if it's in the case mail?
As far as, what, you mean scanning the load truck feature?
For the,
Yeah, well, I don't know how your office has given instruction as far as the load truck feature, but we encourage everybody to utilize the load truck feature as much as possible because that's going to give you credit for all of that time as you're loading your vehicle. So if you're casing your spurs, then you're probably not scanning them using load truck, but I don't know what your local instructions are. So.
Okay. Next question. Sometimes we have at the end of the day parcels that go out on 7:33 time.
Okay.
So they're not getting put onto the routes.
They are in DSR.
Oh, for each route is going to get their credit?
Yeah. In the DSR program, we see all the scan events, regardless of what operation you might be on. It's about where the scan was made, where the breadcrumb was dropped, and what the delivery point is. It's what the carriers actually do every single day.
Okay, and lastly, we have a lot of older carriers on our route, in our office, that have gotten to a mounted route.
Okay.
Now, if you're doing territorial adjustments, you can't say they won't be touched if they're 8 hours, because if they're bordering somebody that's got too much, it's gonna flow over.
Potentially, it could, but potentially maybe not. The
Okay.
reads, hang on, let me answer your question. The REITs have the ability to identify those senior carriers, that's why we ask for that seniority list, so that they can do an evaluation and an adjustment that's least intrusive based on seniority from the top down. There may be occasions where if you have a route that's in the middle of the zone and it's a senior carrier, that it's going to get touched because there's just no way around it, unfortunately.
Right.
Because we adjust from the outside in.
And if they have restrictions?
Restrictions don't come into the equation.
So then they could technically be on a route that they can't do.
Potentially, we're going to try to minimize that to the extent possible. That's what part of that consultation process is. If the REIT team has the option of choosing between two different areas of territory, and maybe this is curb line that we might have to add to your route, and maybe this is park and loop that we might have to add to your route, but you have those medical restrictions and you're a senior carrier, then the REIT team has the ultimate decision of saying, we're going to add that territory that makes sense to add to your route.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Terrence Wilson, branch 396, Plainfield, New Jersey. Will there be an option for travel time integrated into the scanner, or it's not necessary?
It's not necessary. The scanner already measures travel time as part of the DSR program.
So far as the 3996, should we still be using it and checking off travel time?
You should always complete a 3996 regardless, because that's a requirement in the M41 that you do that. Do we need 3996s for this process? No. No. Because whatever you record at the bottom of that form is irrelevant, because the scanner is going to show us exactly what you did on any given day. Sometimes people, they come back into the office, they make, retro rings to show their auxiliary assistance. Sometimes that's not accurate. In this program, we can see that. We can see exactly when you leave the line of travel to go work on your auxiliary assistance and when you come back. So we have an accurate recording of that time.
Hi, Terrence Graves, branch 916, Eugene, Oregon. My question has to do with the zone selection process. We have some of our offices where there's routes that can be evaluated at 13, 14, 15, 16-hour routes. These are massive routes. And the TIAREAP team has already said they don't want to touch these offices. In fact, they said these are routes where the entire office is qualified for 271 Gs. The TIAREAP team has already said they don't want to touch them. They said they're going to go to smaller offices and do these larger, out-of-control offices in 2023 at some point down the road. Why are we not going after these offices where they are the worst of the worst? Why are we waiting until 2023? These are horrific offices. So
there is no provision in the MOU that says we have to pick any specific offices or not pick any specific offices. If you have concerns that your office wasn't selected during the selection period, you should probably talk to your MBA and let them know, and that way maybe the teams can look at mutually opting you in.
Right, my suggestion to the MBA would be to take all the TIAREAP teams, move their offices out onto the sidewalk at 110-degree heat, and make them work 14 hours a day like the carriers are. That way we can get the entire nation done by October. That's my suggestion.
I can appreciate carriers are working harder than they ever have before. Staffing is a critical issue. I get that. I understand that. Unfortunately, in this process, we don't have any ability to control any of those staffing type of issues. That's something else that the Postal Service is going to have to address in a different forum.
Clement Chang, Tampa, Florida, branch 599. I have a question regarding the MDD. Starting coming Saturday, we are using the MDD to punch in. So that means management asking us to work it off the clock before we get the scanner.
Yeah.
So how are we getting the credit back for those time?
Okay. In the city delivery workshop, and I'll talk about that here because I am actually in charge of the MDD, but we talked about that in the city delivery workshop with the timekeeping feature. The Postal Service, we took that information to them and we let them know, hey, there are too many menus to navigate before a carrier is on the clock. So what they have done is they have created a timestamp that as soon as the carrier scans their badge and hits begin tour, that is the moment when they are on the clock, regardless of how long it takes them to navigate and get through the menus.
I mean, so let's say
So they get credit for all that time.
All I'm saying is sometimes some office will take 10 minutes before they get to the carnival clock to get the scanner. So are we still get a 10 minutes back before we punch in?
What do you mean it takes 10 minutes to get to the scanner?
My question is, you have to get the scanner to use your badge to punch in.
Right.
So at some office, you have to go to a countable cage to get your scanner. So the time before we get a scanner, it might take you 5 minutes or 10 minutes before you get it.
You should be able to clock in at your normal time, regardless. I mean, if you have problems getting to the accountable cage to get that, you need to, scanners are not accountable items, so there should be no signing process for scanners or anything like that. You should have those available to you at the moment that you're ready to punch in.
But if we take a minute or two to get the scanner, so we still lost a minute our work. Because I still take a minute to get to the scanner, because I have to have a scanner before I punch in.
Right, I understand, but it's no different than you have to have a time card and you have to have an EBR to get to be order to clock in. It's not any different.
So would that be a grievance issue that you're working off the clock to get a scanner?
If it takes you an inordinate amount of time to acquire a scanner in order to clock in where you don't have it available to you when it's time to clock in, then you need to get with your steward and get that taken care of.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Mark Eisenhower, Branch 421, San Antonio, Texas. Two-part question. First part, and you've touched on it a little bit, is with core. Having been through all the wraps and traditional route adjustments, core, and let me preface this by saying I'm a partner of the crowd. Core doesn't know that these are my two heavy blocks, and it comes up with some crazy lines of travels and loops. Are we going to be able to change that, or with us being at the table, adjust the satchel weight limits so we're not carrying 5 blocks, we're
Yes.
carrying 1?
Yes. That is why we have joint core technicians, so that they identify those issues and make sure that we don't have crazy bag weights and that we don't have loops that contain 400 stops and that type of thing. So yeah, we're going to have that capability in this process to do that.
And also adjust areas like they touched on the businesses. Well, I have a school. Well, I want to deliver it in the morning and I don't want to be there in the afternoon when they're all getting out. So I set it up so it's in the middle of the day.
Right, yeah. The core line of travel report will be available so that we can look at that kind of information. If you have that concern, you're going to want to definitely mention that in your adjustment consultation to your team so that they can help the core technicians and make sure that that gets corrected in a way that makes sense.
The second part of the question is the data integrity. Having been through all the wraps and being the shop steward, to this day, they know every morning I'm looking for the work hour workload posted. Now there's only a handful of carriers that actually pay attention to that. That being said, pretty much for sure on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, there's errors in the volume recording. Let's say I had 2 EDDMs and he only put me down for 1. I say, hey, I cased this one, since I already had the other one, I'm going to every house. Okay, I'll give you casing credit. Are we have to go back to old school to where we're writing notes on every day of what we had volume-wise and coverage-wise?
Well, that's up to you. I mean, you absolutely have the right to do that, for sure. That's why we want to make sure that that information gets posted. Is there going to be a team that's going to look at every single day and make sure that all of the volume data is recorded properly? Probably not. I don't know that we could go down to that minutia. The goal is to get an overall evaluation and adjustment of the route based on, the most information that we possibly have. The vast majority of the volume data now is automated, so most of it gets recorded. Probably 90% of it gets recorded properly. That little 10% that maybe doesn't get recorded properly, overall is probably not going to impact the route significantly, but definitely you're going to want to mention that during your consultation to let them know that, hey, I don't always get credit for everything that I'm supposed to when it comes to the volume.
Right, but bringing it up, I mean, the supervisor's pretty good about, oh, hey, I'll change that. But from an individual standpoint, unless I follow up and say, hey, did you change my volume from 2 days ago when I took out 3 coverages?
Right. Yeah, if you see that and you go to the supervisor and they don't correct it, then get with your local steward and they'll make sure that it gets done.
So yes, take notes on your volume every day.
Yep.
Cool. Chevelle Evans again from Branch 11, Chicago. I was hearing part of one question, and I don't know, maybe start looking at the wall or whatever, but I'm trying to, the whole clocking in with your scanner. We normally don't get our scanners till 10 o'clock or so because they always tell us that information being downloaded or whatever until the clerks are done processing all the accountables and whatnot. So we're still going to be able to use our card, right? Either way.
There are some places where the timekeeping feature has already been implemented on the MDD. There are other locations where it has not been. You are in the central area, that doesn't roll out until after peak season.
Okay.
So you don't have to be concerned about that.
Okay, and then with that, the live week. Is the live week going to happen once we know, like my station's on the north side of Chicago, once that my station is picked for a certain time to get adjusted or to be looked at, is that when we're given our live week when it's going to happen?
The REIT team will notify you in advance of the live week.
Okay, and then as far as the 7 weeks of data, they told us back in June, okay, this stuff counts. You know, do your route the way you're supposed to, make sure you're, to keep it to the integrity of your own route. But I also heard that you guys are going to be able to reach data back even as far as last year, that your prior, but you have the access to it. Is any of that even going to be used, or are you actually starting from, you're not going to go any further back than,
It's only 7 months prior to the live week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
So
only 7 months prior to the live
7
week.
months back. Okay.
The teams may look at alternate data during that 7 months.
Yeah.
But it's only the 7 months prior to the live week.
Okay, only 7 months prior. Great.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And they've got to skip June, July, August, and December. Yeah.
It's a 7 useful month.
Right, it's the 7 useful months prior. Cannot use any data from June, July, August, or December. Unless you're in a 271 situation, yeah. Yes?
Good morning, Ray Giannotti, Thomas River, New Jersey. Under RIMS, they couldn't solely use the scanner for discipline. But now that we've agreed to this new process, do you anticipate that changing at all?
RIMS is a completely separate system from DSR, but I will tell you that DSR cannot be used for disciplinary purposes. The only people that have access to the DSR data are the people that are on the route evaluation and adjustment teams, and that information cannot be used for disciplinary action. It's strictly to identify, evaluate, and adjust routes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, Dan Nyland, branch 759, Greenwich, Connecticut. We still have all Amazon, so in the mornings we're doing actually package runs, but being told to swipe on 733, which the majority of we're just doing 721 anyway. Is that going to hurt anybody who's doing the 733?
Nope. Clock rings don't matter in this process, because every scan or every event, every package that's delivered on your route on any given day is going to show up in the DSR program. It doesn't matter what operation you're on.
And how about pivoting out routes? Say like we're getting a whole route pivoted out. If the people doing the pivots aren't going into their settings on the road to key in that pivot, is that going to hurt people?
It will still show in DSR. The DSR breadcrumbs will show where that scanner is and where that scan event took place, and it'll show on your route and will allocate time to that delivery event. It doesn't matter whether they clock to it or not.
And how about when pivots didn't get delivered or on certain days?
Well,
Which definitely happens.
Yeah, when there's non-delivery, that's something that you're going to want to make sure that you let the local office contacts know, or let the REIT teams know when they're doing your consultations that, hey, my route doesn't always get delivered every day. And they'll see that. They'll see that. If on the average your street time is 6 hours and 40 minutes, for example, and then one day all of a sudden it's 4 hours, they're going to know, and they're going to start asking why. And they're going to eliminate that from consideration in the evaluation process. They're going to eliminate that day. They're going to say, hey, look, this whole route didn't get delivered that day. We're not going to look at that day.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Darlene Tate, branch 343, St. Louis, Missouri. I have two questions, please. The new growth, do we have to, from the last inspection, we have new growth. Do we have to bring it to the team, or how do you all handle the new growth?
Part of this process, when the teams, when a zone has been opted in, the first thing the team does is they have a meeting with the local office contacts about a month, sometimes a little bit farther than a month out from your live week. Part of that process is we need updated edit books. You need to get your edit books up to date and submitted to AMS as soon as possible so that we make sure that all those delivery points are recorded.
Okay, and then the second thing, on a live week, every piece of mail has to go out. Is that correct?
Not typically. I mean, it's not an inspection. It's not a traditional inspection. We absolutely encourage you to take everything, but because we're looking at historical data as well, it's going to be an overall average of everything that you do during that entire time period. It's not just that live week.
All right. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Tawana Abbott, branch 283. This question is about my assignment. I have 4 hours of business on my route, and 3 of those businesses, they get the CCAs. I have 2 businesses that collect, you have to go out on the route and collect 50 to 200 packages, and also I have to pick them up, but they give them to the CCAs before I come in. Does that go into my data?
Yes.
So normally my average of packages is 1,000 packages a week. So if I was out there, I would probably make about 3 hours overtime. I get a lot of mail packages through these businesses. So all those CCAs are delivering and picking up all my packages on my assignment. They're gonna credit it to my route?
Yes. Yep, and you're gonna make sure you tell the team during your consult. I know you will. But you're gonna make sure to let them know. And yeah, that'll get credited to your route.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
You're welcome.
Surrounding Sutherland, branch 343, St. Louis. So I heard you say something about we should be using our load functions every day. Well, at my station, I say about since like February, our load function haven't worked.
Okay.
We haven't been making a load since like February.
Okay. You probably should get that information to your district lead team to let them know. If that's something that your local management has either told you not to do or isn't available for you to do, then that, will impact your loading time potentially. But it has come down from headquarters at the national level that the load truck feature should be utilized in all locations.
Right, they're not telling us to, it's just when you try to do it, it kicks it out.
It kicks it out? Okay. Send that information to your MBA to have them send it up to me, because I can talk to the MDD engineering department and find out why that's not happening. And actually, did you say you were from St. Louis? They're already working on it. Because Larissa let me know, so I
know they picked our offices, so the load hasn't worked in months.
Understood. You'll be sure and tell them that during your consultation for sure. Yes.
Hi, Chris Bermudez, branch 38, New Jersey. This falls into one of those stupid questions. What if the carrier is on vacation that week, the live week?
That's not a stupid question, that's a great question. So, if the carrier happens to be on vacation, in a traditional inspection process, management had the right to block out weeks on the leave schedule if they knew far enough in advance. This process does not give them the right to do that. We are not going to deny a letter carrier their ability to take annual leave when they want to take annual leave. So having said that, if somebody is on vacation during that live week, then the team can say, hey, you know what, he's coming back on Monday, we're just going to move his live week to the following week.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Jeanette, Somerville, New Jersey, 768. My question is in regards to when you have carriers that actually are runners, and they're showing 2-3 hours under time, how they're going to be evaluated with this program?
They're going to be evaluated and adjusted based on what they do every single day. We can encourage them not to do that, but if they do, they do. I mean, they're going to get evaluated and adjusted based on their performance and what they do every single day. If they're skipping their breaks, we can see that in the program and we can give them credit for that time. But if they choose to run, then that's unfortunate for them, because I don't think that that's the best methodology, but that's what they choose to do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Sherry DeMasilio from Branch 860. On Sunday deliveries, the CCAs deliver Amazon, but sometimes they're told to deliver network parcels. Is that included in the adjustment for the route, or is...
The team can take a look at that information if they have a concern that there are a lot of network parcels that are being delivered on Sunday. That's something the local office contacts would let the teams know, and then they would take that into consideration when performing their evaluation and figuring out what those base parcel volumes may be.
Okay, and one other question. I have a school on my route that gets out like midday on one day of the week, and sometimes I deviate for that. Will that matter, or?
No. The team may ask you about it during a live week, but if they are doing something that you legitimately have to do, you're going to get credit for that time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly Busalaki, branch 576, Phoenix, Arizona. I had put in for a 271G. The MOU came out May 10th, in my route inspection went to the TIAREAP process. I never had a live week consultation.
Okay, so hang on, let me stop you for 1 second, and I want to ask you, where in the 271 process were you when the memo was signed? Because that's important. Had they done any data collection? Had they done 1838Cs or anything like that yet?
I had finished the actual 3 days was me and 3 days was another carrier, so that part was done.
Okay, so if all of that data had already been developed and collected prior to the signing of the MOU, that information gets sent to the DLTs. You do not get a live week because the actual inspection portion was done prior to the signing of the MOU. They will implement the adjustment based on the data if they feel that it's reasonable, and then we'll come back and we'll do an adjustment review on the route.
Okay, so then I did have, so the consultation I had via Zoom means nothing.
Not if all of the data was collected prior to the signing of the MOU.
Okay, thank you.
Because we couldn't start that live week process, so forth, until after the signing of the MOU. So there were things that were already in progress prior. Okay? You're welcome.
Dave Rice, branch 2184, Western Wayne County. For routes that have partial high-rises, I know that you can't use the DSR in high-rise, so will they get a combination DSR 39.99, or will their whole route be a 39.99, traditional 39.99?
It just depends. It depends on how much of the route they can identify utilizing the DSR program. If they don't feel like they can get a good $39.99, of course you're going to get credit for all that time you're in the high rise, and you're going to get credit for all that delivery. But if they don't feel like they can create a virtual $39.99 because of the demographics of the route, so to speak, then they may have to do a traditional one. It's just going to be up to the team to determine what they can and cannot do.
So,
I mean, if we're only talking an hour maybe of the route that is not apparent in DSR, then they may still be able to utilize the DSR for the 99.99 process.
Okay, so it's an either or, it's not a combination.
No, it's an either or. It either has to be a DSR 99 or it has to be a traditional 99.
Paul Mooney, Branch 84, Pittsburgh. I have two questions. The first one deals with travel to, travel from. The DSR breadcrumbs, if I go through 5 routes to get to my route, it'll automatically put the breadcrumb time on my route?
Yes.
Okay. Part 2 question is the workload report by the carrier. Since June, July, August don't count, should management be posting that September 1st or?
No, management should be posting the work hour workload report from the date the MOU was signed. From May 10th going forward, every single day that report should be posted.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's for every office in the country. It does not matter whether your zone was opted in or not opted in. It's for every office in the country.
Cool, this is good news. My name is Darrell Kryler from Branch 1091, Orlando, Florida. I've been proud to be a city carrier for over 23 years, and I know that there's some issues and obstacles I went through in the past with previous route counts and inspections. I know that it was more of a paper trail or something like that, and the last inspection we had in 2017 was kind of having some issues and blips with that. The adjustment team came and changed the routes. They butchered the routes and changed the routes and abolished one full route and one ox route and made it all 25 routes in our station. However, what used to be that I used to have undertime on some routes, it's changed that it's more like a overtime on each route on average. It could be as little as 15 minutes up to 2.5, 2 3/4 to almost 3 hours, especially day after holiday.
Okay.
And at times, management has to be more flexible and realize that it's hot, dealing with 100 heat index, just triple heat index, and
I agree with you. I agree with you, brother, 100%. Unfortunately, that was a unilateral inspection done back in 2017 by the Postal Service unilaterally. So how those routes came out then, we have no control over. We cannot control how management instructs or gives expectations to letter carriers. All we can do is evaluate and adjust the zones that are opted into this process based on the workload that we see, which we can see every single minute in this technology.
I feel that for what I observed the other day when I came here, I think I felt a lot more delighted with your process, and I feel like it needs to be brought right straight to Orlando.
I would love to. I want to take this everywhere because I think it's important that letter carriers get a fair evaluation of the work that they do every single day.
And I'm just happy to be a member ever since for over 281 months now.
Thank you for your service, my friend.
All right.
Thank you, brother.
It's a pleasure.
Good morning, Lorena Sabel, Branch 3825, Rapid, Maryland. My question is, my T6, and sometimes my scanner glitch. So I can be on one route, but bumps me to a different route. And I will not notice literally sometimes maybe at the end of the day. Okay? So my carriers still have the credit for those days that I've been
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Regardless of what the scanner says visually on the scanner, once that device is cradled, it will show the breadcrumbs of where the scanner actually went every single day and where the events took place.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Best for last.
Yeah, Vin Chu, Pasadena, branch, California, branch 2200. I have a question. Did they require to train all the train the local contacts?
Is there any joint training for the local office contacts?
Yes.
Not necessarily. I will tell you that the REIT teams will give them a lot of instruction and a lot of assistance throughout the process, but there's not really a lot for them to train on other than reading and becoming familiar with the memorandums. We need the local office contacts to provide us with information that's relevant, but it's not something that they need to be trained to do. It's more like, give us your seniority list, tell us about who the replacement carriers are, tell us if there's been any data integrity issues, that kind of thing. There's not really any specific training that they need to take. They just need to be able to answer some questions when we ask.
Yeah, so we would like to let them know, understand the process.
Sure.
Or they couldn't sit in there to talk to the carrier.
Yeah, I would encourage them to read the guidelines. That 32-page document is very, very explicit and very precise and tells you and walks you through the entire process and all the steps. If there's still some concerns, then obviously one of the local REIT teams can do some, conversation and some training with them. The NBA offices may have their DLTs do some training, but that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure what the regions intend to do.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Morning again. This
Good
is
morning.
Wendy Jeter, South Suburban Ward, Murray's Branch 4016. I had one more question. Can we put to rest the myth or affirm the validity of if the carriers take the battery out of the scanner, if that affects the data or not?
If they take the battery out of the scanner, it's going to show up as uncharacterized on the route. Uncharacterized breadcrumbs. I would let them know not to do that because it may create some data integrity issues. It may not. Once they put the battery back in and cradle the device, they may still be able to utilize that data. But what I will tell you is that it's going to pop up on somebody's radar that they have taken the battery out of the device, and it's going to cause some red flags in the office for them. So I would not encourage them to do that because we want to make sure that they get credit for every single thing that they do. I don't know why you would want to not get credit for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Doyle Langston, Branch 226, Fort Worth, Texas. I like the process, but the end product is what matters.
Proof's in the pudding, my friend.
So, if we have two carriers right next to each other and make it simple, they have similar territory, both have the exact same territory. One carries 100 stops in 30 minutes, and the other one carries 25 stops in 30 minutes. The one that carries 25 needs 30 minutes. Are they gonna take the 30 minutes off of this guy? Are they gonna say 25 minutes needs to come off of this, 25 stops need to come off this guy and go on to this guy? Are they gonna say, this is 30 minutes, put it over here. Now this guy's got 2 hours, add it to his route.
Okay, well, let me just tell you, the territory transfer process has not changed. Unfortunately, if we're moving territory, we have to move it for the time that's been allocated to that section of the route that we're moving. Now, having said that, we also have that review process where we're gonna come back and look. Every carrier has the right to establish their own time on their route. That's just the way it is. I love when my route gets adjusted because now all of a sudden I got a free pass. I can start from 0 and I can reestablish whatever time it takes me to carry that route. And that's what the review process is for.
So it's gonna be the same.
It will transfer for whatever the other carrier did initially, but then you're gonna have that period of time to establish your own new time.
Okay.
For that piece.
Thank you.
Good morning, dear. Patrick Mitchell with Modesto, California. You said workload report should be posted at every office, whether you're set up for the inspection or not, correct?
Correct. Every office across the country should have the workload report posted every single day.
Starting from, I think you said May 15th?
May 10th.
All right, I have to look into that. And in
Please
regards
do.
piecemeal count, the old route count, we were able to count our mails and magazines. We're no longer doing that?
No.
We're depending on the automation?
That's correct. That's correct. We are. If you have concerns that your volume is not properly recorded, if you look at your average volumes when they come in to do your evaluation consultation and they seem like they're totally off base, you need to let them know during the consultation. Say, hey, this says I'm only doing 100 flats a day. I'm really casing 400 flats a day on the average. Let them know during the consultation process and they can dig into that and make sure.
I understand, but we had the choice to count it individually or not.
Right.
That's going away.
No, there's no need to count the mail. There's no need to. We want to be as less disruptive to carriers as we possibly can. As far as the live week goes, all the carrier has to do is be prepared to come in and have that consultation, in the next day or two.
Now, I have a dismount part on my route, and I don't necessarily dismount it because it's in a parking lot truck. I don't want to get in an accident. So I sometimes leave my scanner in the truck and just do the 5 to 6 deliveries.
Okay.
That's a no-no now?
I would not recommend you do that. I think it's easier for our team to be able to say, hey, look, he's walking blue. You know what I mean? He's dismounting those deliveries. We got to make sure he gets credit for that time. Because the management person might look at that time and might say, why is he sitting still and not doing anything?
And that's my concern. So
Yeah, I would recommend a carrier have their scanner on them at all times if that's possible. Of course, you don't have to take it to lunch and you don't have to take it, when you're using the bathroom. But I would recommend that carriers have their scanner with them at all times, so that way there is no argument. Management, that scanner will never be able to tell them that you're not working.
I understand it.
You know what I mean? So that way, give our teams the best opportunity to make sure you get credit properly for everything that you do.
And the 271Gs, I currently have some carriers that want a special now.
Okay.
Since we're not one of the zones picked out for the new inspections, I can still go ahead with that process?
Absolutely, absolutely. Carrier's always entitled to ask for a 271G anytime.
Because management, I grieved one right before May, and it went to impasse because management put in a grievance that the district office told them that we weren't doing specials.
That is incorrect.
All right.
That is incorrect. You need to follow up with your shop steward or regional office.
I am the shop steward.
Follow up with the regional office.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
My name is Mary Benjamin Freeman, branch 73, Atlanta, Georgia. Actually, you just answered my question that he had for the 271G, because that's what I wanted to know. If you have a route that has a lot of new growth and it's overburdened, can you go ahead and do this 271G to have a route?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Paul Gagney, branch 142. My question is every MDD now on the DSR program, or are we still back some with RIMS or whatever?
No, there are two separate programs. They're two entirely different programs. DSR breadcrumbs are recorded for every single scanner in every single office every single day. The RIMS program is pre-populated with information. So the information that pops up on things like, okay, you're 500 feet from the delivery point or whatever. That is pre-populated based on the scans that are supposed to happen in the future. Does that make sense? DSR records what you actually do every single second. So they're two completely separate programs.
But all the scanners are using DSR right now?
Yes.
So, because when I drive by, I have park and loop routes, and I drive by a house and it says scan, 5 flats or letters or whatever.
That's a completely different system. That's not DSR. No.
Okay.
When you make those scans, it will show in the DSR system, but it's real-time data. It's not in anticipation. RIMS is in anticipation of that sampling request. That's a completely separate system.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And our coordinates are much better. Our process is much better.
Lastly, Michael Bostic again, New News, Virginia, branch 609. The edit book function on the scanner in our area, I haven't seen it enabled yet.
Okay.
Is there a time frame when it will be enabled, or it's just?
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know. The Postal Service has so many different software packages, and the communication levels between those different systems is difficult sometimes, so it just kind of depends on how quickly they can get it done. But they are interested in getting that capability for carriers.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Is that it? All right. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Mm-hmm.